So actual friend of the channel, Destin, he did an interview with Phil. If you don't know, Destin used to work with IGN until very, very recently, just went solo, is doing his own thing. You should go subscribe like this. Look at that fun little animation to his channel and check out his Patreon and all of that stuff. But he just did an interview with the one and only Phil Spencer to kind of kickstart this foray into the solo side of content creation, which is a pretty solid get to get an interview with the one and only Phil Spencer. Makes me wonder if I should try to do that. I tried to get an interview with Todd. He was not interested. I don't know. They never really directly responded to the request, which doesn't surprise me. You know what? Fair. But who knows? Maybe we could talk to Phil. I did see Phil at Summer Game Fest in June, and he was very, very nice. Very, very nice guy. Shorter than I thought he would be. You know, he's a little shorter. Sarah Bond was also way shorter than I thought. Like 5'4" or 5'5", like way shorter than I thought. That's always the interesting thing about these events is you see these people like in settings like this where they're just on camera and they look totally normal. But then you see them actually standing and walking around and you're like, oh yeah, you're a real human being. You're real. You know, it's always funny to me. But having said that, that has nothing to do with anything we're talking about here. Other than it looks like Phil lost some weight. Phil is looking actually quite healthy here. I don't know if it's just me, but it looks like he's actually lost a good amount of weight from even over the summer when they were doing their Xbox showcase and he was on camera. So good job, Phil. He's looking good. With this though, Destin had a whole interview. I will have it linked in the stream clip that we do. You should go watch the whole thing because there's a lot of really interesting questions in here, like simple questions you would expect him to be asked more often, like why buy an Xbox? If everything is an Xbox, why should I buy one? Possible Steam support, the Xbox Series S parity question we were talking about earlier on stream, all of these things. So we're not going to go through the whole thing because we don't want to do that. One of the questions that they asked in this was with exclusivity platforms or exclusivity of platforms, bringing games to different platforms, all of that stuff. An Xbox handheld, technical leap, AI with Xbox tech, redefining Xbox fans, and you know some more fun conversations with all of this stuff. Indie, more games coming, Phil and Xbox's legacy, all of this. One of the interesting things I'm excited to see is how the end of this generation goes before we look at a segment of this, because typically you see like one executive head up a generation and then a new executive heads up the next generation because they want fresh ideas, right? And that's typically what you would see. And that's what we saw with PlayStation, where they had Sean Layden mostly heading up the PS4 generation from his position. And then with the PS5 generation, you saw Jim Ryan take over, and we all know kind of how that went. But Phil has pretty much been in control of the Xbox One generation and now the Series X generation. And I really wonder if he's going to stick it out into the next one or if he's planning kind of an exit and a retirement. I don't know if his vision has been realized, but there's a lot of interesting things that are discussed in this interview. But the one thing I found interesting was a discussion over Xbox's identity. And this has been one thing that I think has been so fascinating is that Xbox for a long time, you know, is very recognizable. You've got the console, you have the controller, you have the exclusives to that platform, whether it be Halo or you got Gears, you know, there's plenty of things that you could point to. But in the last handful of years, that identity has been majorly shifted. And you've seen it reflected in some of the most hardcore fanboys, for lack of a better term, that like when it was announced Xbox was going to be bringing certain games to PlayStation, they literally burned their merch. Like we watched it on stream, a guy that put his Xbox Series S into a toilet and peed on it. There's another guy that did like a spoken word poetry rap about how devastated he was at Xbox's new direction. Like there were people that had actual mental breakdowns as a result of some games going to PlayStation. Okay. It was bizarre. But I think that that's a reflection perhaps of this shift in direction where Xbox, just frankly, they've decided not to play the game that they had been losing for a decade. They have not been able to maintain a competitive level with PlayStation when it comes to exclusives throughout the entire PS4 era. Even back, you know, coming out of the PS3 era, they were doing very, very well, you know, and PlayStation had their own troubles in the the PS3 era, to be sure. But they started to kickstart exclusives, and those started to drive console sales into the PS4 gen, and then they dominated the PS4 gen. They've been dominating the PS5 gen with console sales, with market share and all of that. And at some point, Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, of course, the parent company of Xbox, and Phil Spencer, they sat down, talked about it. And it's pretty clear. They just said, why would we keep fighting a losing game and a losing battle if we can make our own battle, our own thing that we can win at? Why would we not do that? And that's what they've chosen to do. So instead of playing PlayStation's game that they're very good at playing, they've decided to go a different route and focus on distribution first and foremost. And that's really why Microsoft is a multi-trillion, with a T, trillion-dollar company, because they are some of the best in the world, if not the best in the world, at distributing software. And that's what they're going to do with their games. They're going to make games, which are just fancy programs, and then they're going to distribute them across as many platforms as possible, selling it to anybody and everybody that wants to play it. And that's been reflected in their marketing campaigns, where it's, this is an Xbox, this is an Xbox, this is an Xbox, this is an Xbox. Everything's an Xbox, because they want you to be able to play their games no matter where you are. As long as you can give them money, they want you to give them your money. They will take it. You know, there's no exclusivity. They've just decided not to bother playing PlayStation's game. And that brings up other questions like, okay, why even buy the Xbox hardware then? It's a great question. There might not be a reason to buy their hardware except for playing those games earlier and having some other perks. Like, for me, one of the actual compelling perks and advantages of Xbox as a platform right now is the Play Anywhere program, where you can buy a game like, let's say, Indiana Jones. You can play it on your Series X in your living room, or Series S, whatever, no judgment. And then you can close the game, come downstairs to your game den or bedroom or whatever, and play the game where you left off on your PC. And then you go up and lay in bed, and on your phone with a little controller, you know, backbone, whatever adapter, you play the game through xCloud, all picking up your saves where you left off, and you only bought the game once. In this case, it was Game Pass, but you get what I mean. It's supporting Play Anywhere, right? That's a really compelling offering, and I really like that offering. And it's made me pause and go, if I want to buy one of these games, these single player games, I'm like, oh, maybe I should play it on Xbox because I can play it anywhere. That's a huge advantage over PlayStation, which, yes, they do have their own cloud tech. Yes, they do have the portal to play on the go. But it's nowhere near as robust as Xbox's infrastructure at the moment. They'll get there, but, you know, they're not quite there yet, in my opinion. But all this, you know, builds into this identity issue. Ooh, thank you. A double cheeseburger. My wife spoils me. Chat says hi, by the way. They were upset I didn't say chat says hi earlier on the phone. Going back to whether or not there is a reason to buy an Xbox like console, that's a valid question. And that's one that I'm not sure if there is a solid answer. But here's the thing. I don't think Xbox really cares. Like, would they rather you play on an Xbox Series X? Yeah. But if you're buying one of their games for $70, cool. Xbox has Game Pass, and maybe that's how they maintain a competitive edge is, yeah, if you want to play all these games, whether it's South of Midnight, Fable, Expedition 33, you know, the Ninja Gaiden, you want to play all these games for a really good value, get Game Pass, but you need an Xbox for that. Or you can pay for 70, you know, pay $70 for it on PlayStation, do it that way. That in and of itself could be a very significant value proposition, or at least for people to keep an Xbox on their media center, even if they also have a PlayStation. But like all this builds into the core question is whether or not Xbox is losing its identity. And maybe that's a good thing because they're getting a new identity. They're finding something else, and the brand is changing. And I think that this is the key point, which is just that Xbox is changing. The game is changing, the industry is changing. And for people that are used to business as usual, that feels bizarre. It feels like Xbox has given up, but they aren't really. I mean, they are kind of giving up in this one fight, but they're creating this new fight over here for which Sony isn't really going to counter it as far as I can tell. You know, like they're happy. They get a cut of every copy of Sea of Thieves that sells on their store. Xbox is happy because they're making money on every single copy that's sold. So it's just kind of a new normal. But let's see what Phil says in regard to Xbox losing its identity. And again, I recommend you go watch the whole interview, subscribe to Destin, go show him some support. But let's see what he says in this snippet of the interview.
Absolutely perfect sense to me. I do think that some fans are a little concerned about how should I say it? Xbox losing its
About you destroying the brand. No, I'm kidding. You never know if that's what they're gonna say, you know.
identity, maybe. What would you say to address those concerns from longtime fans?
Well, one, I hear them, right? I'm pretty active in our player base, and I'm active in the community. I listen. I think our identity will continue to evolve, which it frankly always has. But when I hear concerns about, is my library of games safe? Am I still going to be able to play the games? And I think over the years, I'm proud of the commitment we've shown to respecting purchases on our platform through back compat, through cross entitlement, Xbox Play Anywhere, through cross-play, things that we've done to enable people to continue to play. So I hear that when I think about I see the investments we're making in platform and how we want Xbox to show up in multiple places and your library to be available there. When I think about buy to stream, so if I buy a game, I'll be able to stream it to devices. Like, this is all about making sure that your library of games that you own on Xbox are playable in multiple places. So I'd say it's an evolution of our identity, but I believe it's an identity that this industry needs. When you think about where this industry is now and you see the challenges, the business challenges that are out there for many companies, that I think us keep making games more accessible to more people has just got to be front and center for us as an industry. So we continue to see great games that we've seen over the years.
Which is interesting because, of course, like, he is plugged into the community. If you're not familiar, like, he has been found playing all sorts of games. People, like, his Xbox profile is public. You can see what he's playing on any given day. It's actually kind of funny to just see what he's playing and where he's finding time for it. But one of the other things is, like, one of my biggest TikToks ever, funnily enough, was this one actually looking at somebody that found Phil Spencer playing Fallout 76. And in this clip, he's basically playing it, and the people wanted to make sure it was him, so they did a thing to trigger a unique achievement thing to identify it on his whatever, profile, and it was actually him. I mean, they actually found Phil Spencer. P3 is his username. And so he is plugged in, he plays these games, and everybody is able to see that he does. Whereas, like somebody like Jim Ryan, I don't think Jim Ryan touched a controller the last 20 years, and I just don't think he's a gamer. But I think at some point, as the leader of a company, you have to acknowledge when there is feedback that's contrary to the direction you're taking the company, and you have to be firm enough in your decision to stick to it. You can't just, follow suit with whatever whims are guiding, the ship at this given moment. Sometimes you have to kind of take a firm stance and go this way because that's the right direction, or you really believe that's the right direction. And, a great example is of somebody with like vision would be like Steve Jobs. If you don't remember, I wonder if I can find it. It was the Microsoft CEO saying iPhone would flop because it didn't have a real keyboard.
Zune was getting some traction, then Steve Jobs goes to Macworld and he pulls out this iPhone. What was your first reaction when you saw that?
$500 fully subsidized with a plan? I said, that is the most expensive phone in the world, and it doesn't appeal to business customers because it doesn't have a keyboard, which makes it not a very good email machine. Now, it may sell very well or not.
Like, they were following the winds of the industry that they were operating in, because they were trying to do their own phone things, whether it's BlackBerry or eventually the Microsoft phone. But they were listening to what everybody was telling them they wanted, whereas Steve Jobs famously said, no, my job is to give people what they want before they know they want it. And that's just a difference in leadership direction. And that means sometimes you're going to upset your own customers because they're like, what the hell are you doing? But then hopefully your vision is accurate and fair and balanced, and you actually lead everybody into something they didn't even know they wanted yet. As for Phil Spencer with Xbox, oh my God, I just rewound and I got quite the freeze. I'm sorry, Phil. Please let me back. I have to move the frame so I get that avowed review code. But anyway, like with all this, I think that there is a compelling argument that Xbox's identity is being lost, and when Halo is available on PlayStation and Starfield and all these other exclusives are going to every single platform, it kind of devalues what an Xbox is. And that might be right, but it might also be right that this is what makes the business sustainable, but maybe both are right. Maybe it does devalue the brand, but the brand wouldn't really be able to exist unless they were going this direction. Because this is the other piece, is if they tried to play the PlayStation game of Starfield's exclusive, Indiana Jones is exclusive, Doom is exclusive, Fable's exclusive, all of these games are just on Xbox. They could play that game and eventually, over years and years and years, they could grind out more market share and get people to buy their consoles again. But ultimately, it would just be leaving so much money on the table. And from their perspective, it's just unnecessary. They're like, why would we leave so many hundreds of millions of dollars on the table? Which, I mean, again, it's a business. It's not a charity thing. They need to make money. And if these games are launching just on Xbox and they're not turning a profit for Microsoft, it doesn't work to greenlight more. It just doesn't make sense. So they've got to shift and they've got to change their strategy and their goals. And that seems to be what they're doing. So I understand why old school Xbox fans are peeved at the direction they've taken it, bringing everything to everywhere, making nothing really exclusive. And I think a lot of it is also this bitterness because for so long, Xbox fans wanted exclusives and now they're actually getting lots of games produced, but they're not exclusive. And so they're like, hey, what the hell, man? Like, we're missing out. And so I can understand the frustration there, but I just think this is where they're at, and they are fully committing at this point to this new direction. And I mean, that's even something when when Destin, in this case, asked about Starfield. I mean, this was Phil's response.
In Starfield, Indiana Jones has an exclusivity window, to be fair. Can you solidify that Starfield's staying put for the time being?
No, like I'm not, there's no specific game that this kind of goes back to my red line answer. Mm-hmm. Like there's no reason for me to put a ring fence around any game and say this game will not go to a place that it would find players, where it would have business success for us. What we find is we're able to drive a better business that allows us to invest in great game lineup like you saw. And that's our strategy.
So even when asked specifically, is Starfield locked into Xbox? He won't say that. He's like, nope, I'm not going to say that it's going to be stuck exclusive for now even, which to me makes me think that it is coming probably by the end of the year to PlayStation and stuff like that. Does it do gangbuster numbers there? Probably not, but like it still will do more money and more numbers than it's been doing, which is 0 on those platforms. So why not? But with all this, I mean, it's fascinating to see the new direction. We're going to see more and more of these projects outlined over the next few months, especially in June with their showcase, and I'm here for it because they've got some big games on the lineup. Some big games, and I have a feeling they have some tricks up their sleeve for the later this year as well. So buckle up. He took my thing.